Welcome to the latest edition of the CPO to CEO podcast, a series in which we interview business leaders who have taken the path from being functional leaders of a procurement department. It's a series in which we speak to different CEOs, MDs, and other business owners. And we've had some interesting guests over the past weeks and months who have had different perspectives on this particular subject. Today, I'm very lucky to have a good friend of mine, Simon Leigh, who's the managing director of Premier in Hotels Middle East. Simon, welcome.
Thank you very much. No, I don't, a privilege, honestly, and a friend as well.
Now, I'm not sure which part is it.
I'm not sure what you normally say that. No, look, honestly, Sam, thanks for the opportunity to spend time with you today.
Now, thank you for taking the time and thank you for coming in person, because sometimes we do this remotely, but you're quite gracious to pop in and see us in person, which is always better.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's an interesting subject today as well, so we can explore, dig around, and try and understand. I think a subject that for a lot of people that probably have spent their careers or considering entering their careers into procurement supply chain, they deserve to understand and know that actually, look, there is a path here. It comes with some caveats around how you get there, but it does. Hopefully, we'll get to a point where we can kind of reassure people that you're in a brilliant career position if you're within procurement supply chain, and there's zero reason why it shouldn't create that next step to those bigger roles as well.
Well, you're a living example of that, and it's a path not often travelled, which is, I guess, why this podcast is so popular. If I would like to say so myself. But before we get into it, Simon, we know where you are. Talk about. Let me ask you, what did you want to do when you were growing up?
When I grew up, originally, I wanted to be I wanted to be in the Royal Air Force. I wanted to fly planes. And my grandfather was he was a pilot in a Wellington in World War II. And forever and a day he was always engaged with the RAF, kind of post RAF. So he was a member of the Aircrew Association. And he kind of encouraged me at 13 3/4, because that's how it works, to go into the Air Cadets. And I went into the Air Cadets, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the opportunity to, you go different places, see different things, do different things that typically as a 13, 14-year-old kid, as opposed to hovering around on the streets, playing a bit of football, it was kind of doing different things, shooting, all sorts of bits and pieces. And a lot of it kind of Air Force related. So for me, I learned quite early on discipline in terms of hierarchy. There was a big piece around understanding respect. And in many ways, it helped shape me, and it helped shape my thinking. So my aim was to do that. I think the later teenage years then slightly took over, and I think you did your decisions throughout your career, regardless of what age you are. I don't think you ever necessarily plan exactly where you're going to go or where you're going to get to. If you could, life would be an amazing crystal ball, but it doesn't always typically turn out that way. So I was in the Air Cadets until I was 17. Loved it, flying, all sorts. But when it came to make the plunge to go to actually get into the RAF, life was in a different place, and the opportunity didn't quite work out. So I found my way into work, into commercial world. I didn't follow a traditional route either. I didn't go straight to university. So I did my A-levels, and then went into work, and then I subsequently studied later, all the way through, and then at CIPS, so CIPS route as well as then FCIPS. And I found my way into procurement after spending time in manufacturing. So I went and worked for my father in the southwest of the UK. That was an experience. So he made me kind of understand every process on the shop floor. He manufactured printed circuit boards. So when I decided I wasn't going to go into the RAF, he kind of said, right, you've got to come and work. So I went and worked for him, every process on the shop floor. Understood how to make a PCB, went into time in planning, engineering, sales. And then I got to a point when I was about 21, so I did that for about 3-4 years. I was going to move back up to the southeast, which is where I was born and raised. And the opportunity came up to join BAE Systems, and it was in the avionics division with BAE Systems. This back in 2001, and it was to go and become a buyer. And I was like, "Well, that sounds rather marvelous. What's this? What's this all about?" I know how to make circuit boards. I know how to plan, and then I know the engineering process in terms of designing circuit boards, and I was doing production management at a really young age. uh, and it was going from manufacturing circuit boards into buying them. And that was I had no idea how to buy. What's this buying stuff? What's this procurement and purchasing stuff? And that was my first entry in 2001 into, what became, 21, 22-year kind of career in procurement and supply chain. So a route of finding myself and understanding what I wanted. And then I loved it. Absolutely brilliant. 4.5, nearly 5 years with BAE.
Fantastic. Who wouldn't love it? You're suddenly, from making PCBs, you're getting paid to spend other people's money, as I like to
Yeah,
say.
absolutely.
And who's going to knock that? But a non-traditional route, definitely started from I guess working in sort of in a family business type thing in effect. But you've got some large organisations on your CV, from BAE Systems, Tesco's, throughout your career, certainly in the procurement ladder anyway. So
Yeah.
and a wide range of experience in all sorts of fields. So talk to us about that career ladder that took you to the pinnacle of procurement.
Yeah. I think when you, yeah, as I see it, procurement is genuinely a great function to be able to really understand how the mechanics of business work more broadly. And you may not think about that every day that you turn up to do your category that you may be responsible for. But as you evolve and as you move through different experiences, that accumulation and compounding of knowledge and what's worked, what's not worked within different industries, because you can move quite easily within different industries, and I've done that. So I've spent time within military and aerospace. I've spent time with telecoms, construction. So I spent quite a long time at Tarmac in the UK. So I was procurement director at Tarmac. So my journey, I wind slightly back. So BAE Systems all the way through to procurement lead, senior buyer. Spent a lot of time in my latter year to 2 years with BAE in the US. So I was part of the global negotiation process for electronic components, and we would consolidate the requirements for electronic components throughout all of the UK and Europe BAE sites, and then we go and negotiate with manufacturers and distributors in Washington. It was brilliant. Loving it. I was like 21, 22 years old, flying off to Washington to go and negotiate on these global negotiations. And it was basically 2-year price agreements that we were negotiating with manufacturers and distributors for components. And it would be project based. So you do active components, passive components, connectors, and it was back into kind of avionics world as well. It's kind of military aerospace avionics, and it was it's a fantastic, again, learning opportunity in an environment which was every day was an opportunity to learn in terms of the size, scale, and complexity of some of these projects. And those projects at military, from a lot of the military projects, are typically a lot of the value is in the support contract post actually the main contract as well. So you wouldn't be just thinking about sourcing or buying for, procuring, less than buying, because buying's a bit old school, right? In terms of procuring for that project, you'd be actually thinking about how do you manage the life cycle of it afterwards. And it just gave me this great opportunity to understand and learn. So I moved from there into telecoms. I spent a bit of time in telecoms. From telecoms, I then moved into construction, and I was procurement director for a company called ISG, which is pure office construction and fit out. So I did that for a while. And then I moved to Tarmac, and Tarmac was probably the point where, and Tarmac isn't, a lot of people go, oh, what's the Tarmac business? Well, Tarmac was owned at that point in time by Anglo American. It's now a joint venture, or was a joint venture with Lafarge, and I think it's evolved even further since then to Blue Circle. I could be wrong. And that for me is a vertically integrated business. It was buying everything from explosives for quarries through to big, heavy plant and machinery, through to all of the machinery that you would require to physically go out and construct roads. And therefore it had a broad requirement to really get underneath the supply chain and the integrators, because it was vertically integrated. So you're literally from quarry to road. And that, again, taught me a lot. It wasn't just about direct or indirect, it was actually all of it. So it's the responsibility for all of the procurement involved in terms of being able to support the business in terms of its projects. But again, there were opportunities to learn as the business evolved as well. So I spoke about the joint venture. So being involved in business change, being involved in opportunities as the business went through the sale from Anglo American through to the joint venture with Lafarge, being involved in the separation and integration, being able to set up the new co-operating model and organisational structure. So you suddenly start getting different tools in your toolbox in terms of what you can deliver and what you can learn, every day. Again, school day in terms of what you learn. Time out with Tesco. I spent a period at Tesco, and then I think things happen in your life as well. So I went through a period in my life, and I'm always one to be honest, where I evaluated kind of where I was at, and I think my career had moved quite rapidly, and I'd moved around the UK, and I spent time in the US, and I took a moment to take stock and go, actually, am I happy in what I'm doing? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? And I'll be honest with you, the move to Tesco didn't quite work out for me. Didn't quite work out, and for me, it was a really big course correct. So I spent then the next probably 3-4 years on a contractor basis. So I could say that I was a managing director of my own consultancy. No, I wasn't. I was contracting. And that's quite humbling,
Right.
because you move from being the procurement director, and we're winning CIPS awards, and we're winning supply management awards. You then make a decision in your career, and I think this is where everybody has got to be eyes wide open in terms of why would you move? What was it? And I'll say it starts with why. You'll ask me about a book later, and I'll use that as an example. Why? Why are you going to move, and what's your purpose, and why are you going to, why are you going to do this? And for me, it was quite, as I say, quite a humbling experience when you then decide to go on your own. But it did give me a 3-4 year period to really consolidate the thinking about actually what matters most for me in my career, and where do I want to get to. And I knew I was absolutely passionate about procurement, passionate about supply chain. It was what I knew. I'd been involved with lots of really good organisations at that point in time. And through probably my third engagement, so I had a period of time with Balfour Beatty. I did a little bit of work at the co-op, and then an opportunity came up to work as interim CPO for Costa. So there comes the into Whitbread, and that's now nearly 8.5 years ago.
Wow.
So
Nice.
yeah, it does. So I joined, I think it's February 2017, as interim CPO. Entered the world of coffee and retail, and I loved it. It was brilliant, really exciting. I was working for Dominic Paul, who was the CEO of Costa at the time. He's now CEO of Whitbread. So Dominic went from Costa post sale, which I'll touch on in a moment, to Domino's, and then he came back as Alison. Our prior CEO moved on, and Dominic took on the responsibility of CEO, which is about 2 years ago now. So joining Costa, it was about 8-9 months, and then the opportunity came up to move into the main Whitbread business. So looking after supply chain. As that evolved, and as we then went through the sale of Costa to Coca-Cola, the opportunity came up to bring procurement and supply chain together. So that was something I was fortunate enough to be able to take on at that point in time. So we were about 2.5 years into the Whitbread journey, picked up originally supply chain, and then picked up procurement and supply chain. And that was full responsibility, end-to-end supply chain, all the 3PLs, all of the food and the drinks supply chain for all of the outlets, so all of the F&B restaurants that Whitbread owns, as well as then all procurement associated with building, owning, operating hotels. And it was, for me, it was that moment where you go, this is the CPO role. This is what it looks like. This is great. It's a FTSE 100 CPO responsibility, with an organisation I'm very, very passionate about, and a brand that I really can connect to, believe in terms of what the business is set to do and set to achieve. For me, I was in a great place, and then the opportunity came up through career conversations around, okay, so what next? And I was like, I quite like general management. I think that might be a good thing. And I'm sitting there going, start with why, Simon. Start with why. Are you really sure? What does that mean? But I spent quite a bit of time understanding that actually, how do I bridge a gap, and how can I run a business? How can I be responsible for a business unit, and how can I get that exposure to do so? Because otherwise, your option is CPO role to another CPO role to another CPO role to another CPO role. And at a point in time, that, albeit will have exciting challenges along the way, gets to a point where you're not in some ways, and this isn't to undermine any CPO opportunity. I think you get to a point where you go, can I flex the intellectual muscle here and kind of go, maybe can I bridge that gap? Can I do it? And the conversation evolved. I spent a lot of time in Shanghai with the international sourcing, and we were stopping back on our way back from Shanghai one trip, and we spent some time with the Premier Inn JV team out in the Middle East. And I kind of looked and I kind of thought, I quite like this. This is a lovely business. It's the joint venture in the Middle East for Premier Inn has been in operation about 18 years. It's 51% Emirates. It's 49% Whitbread. And I looked at it and I thought, actually, there's three big roles within Whitbread. There was the UK role, which is UK and Ireland, 850 properties, and rookie kind of MD CEO. That wasn't going to happen, right? You kind of know you got to back yourself, but also know where your capability sits and lies. Germany, there've been an awful lot of investment in the German business, and the German business is now 10 years. It's 10 years since the first property in Frankfurt, and it's had the best part of €1 billion invested in that. Flying along, over 60 properties operating now, and the pipeline is over 100, so it's well established, and it's got a brilliant German team that are now set up and running that operation. So at that time, that's probably, and I don't speak German, so that's probably quite a point as well. And then the discussion was, look, we've got this JV business. It's been going 14 years, 13, 14 years. It probably needs some help. It hasn't generated a return to shareholders. It's not currently in profit. You need to go out and we need to understand what the options are. So it comes with some risk, but if you're up for it, gentleman was retiring, he'd been out here, and do you want to have a go? And that's kind of how it came together.
And that's quite an interesting journey, which I think you may have made it sound a little bit more straightforward than it probably is, because the obvious question before I come back to what you're actually doing now is, there are very few people who have taken this path of yours, which is from CPO to CEO. Why do you think that is?
Let me kind of break it down in a couple of ways. My sense would be, and my experience tells me, that procurement's been on a journey. I think it's evolved a very, very long way from where it was 20 years ago. But when you look at where our board level, exco level, C level selection typically made from, they don't typically look within that pool. So within the procurement supply chain arena, that's not the first place where it's typically focused.
I mean, a lot of people are looking at CFO to CEO seems to be a shoe-in. There, maybe, I don't know, sales director.
So strategy.
Yeah. So why is that? Why do you think that is? Why do you think the selection pool doesn't sit within the procurement leader?
I think some of it's probably mindset, right? So a bit of muscle memory. So where traditionally do you look? And if you go, have you got commercial responsibility? Because reality is follow the money. You have to follow the money. So, and actually I think procurement and supply chain people are typically very good at that. But when you look for, when you're thinking from let's take commercial director, right? So you come up through the sales route, you typically go in as a chief commercial officer. So you'll take on commercial responsibility, top line responsibility, revenue generation. CFO typically is responsible for controlling costs. So actually, when you look at the P&L, you go, what's my sales line doing, and what's my costs doing, and what does that tell me? And therefore, finance through to finance into CFO roles, and then strategy, because typically it's big change. So have you led big change? Have you been involved in big change? Can you shape operating models? Can you shape organizational structure? Can you define what matters most for a business, and can you set a plan for the business? And I think those are elements which typically then get looked at by those more traditional routes. Um, and therefore it, it, it makes the role of anyone in a senior role in procurement really important to go, actually, did you know I've got this skill set? I can follow the money. Commercially, I'm really super sharp. I understand the detail. I understand the complexity. I can analyze it, and I can also make it simple so you understand what we need. I can shape strategy, and I can help change. I can deliver change. And I'm financially sharp enough as well. So not only can I follow the money, but financially also, I understand this as well. And that's probably where it's the responsibility of any CPO with their teams as well, in terms of succession planning, that they're really thinking about how they can continue to give, because we always get the opportunity in the room. So anyone that says, "Oh," and I hate the saying, "seat at the table, seat at the table." So no, it's not about that. It's not about that. It's about just making sure that you are very relevant in the business, and it's very clear about the value that you add. And procurement has done that so many times over the last 20, 25 years. And there's so many examples of projects that if they hadn't have been managed brilliantly through procurement, businesses would typically be in a far worse shape. So I think there's a bit about self-responsibility on really highlighting the fact that you've got an absolutely amazing talent pool within the procurement supply chain industry. I'd say potentially brighter and better than some of the more traditional pools that you may choose to mine in. What you might need to do is spend a bit more time considering them when it comes to succession planning for the top jobs.
So it's that brand procurement thing. So it's almost like not waving the flag, not shouting about it enough, not putting yourself forward. In other words, to say, these are my successes, these are my skills, these are my attributes, this is what I've done for the business, not for the department, i.e. procurement. And what you're saying is that's not happening.
Potentially, it's difficult to you can't really blanket. It's not a blanket statement, because I would imagine there's probably people screaming at the TV as I'm talking, going, "Oh, what are you on about?" But because they'll have potentially had that break, or they have a decent example of where someone has been able to, really break through that. It's probably not dissimilar from any situation in terms of your career. You have to continue to make sure that you're relevant, and you communicate really clearly about the purpose of what you're trying to achieve, and what you can deliver, and how you can help, and how the function can continue to support strategically a business, and therefore the importance of what you do. A lot of it is down to the individuals. Have you got the ability to build brilliant relationships, influence, basic skills, basic but very important skills that really, in many ways, differentiate, I think, the individuals that then end up in those kind of leadership roles as well.
Right. So for those who now want to identify with a business leader, so talk to us about your day job now as heading up your operation.
So before I answer that, I'll go back to help bridge a gap, because there's probably a gap in the conversation, which is, so you made the move within a business, and part of that was because the business saw the fact that I could pick that up and do it. If I was applying for that job outside of the business, so if I was outside of Whitbread, and I was in a procurement role, and Whitbread advertised managing director, Middle East, would they, and I'd applied for that. So I'm not with Whitbread, right? I'm applying externally for that role. It's been advertised. Would I have been considered?
Would AI have deselected you?
Potentially. So not only deselected potentially from, by AI, right? But actually, would I have even been considered? So I think within the external market, because I've got procurement for 20 plus years on my CV, I'm a CPO, I've got a strong record of what's been delivered across the businesses that I work for, and some really good examples of organisations that I work for. But would I have actually got over the line in terms of an initial CV review to go, actually, does a CPO fit an MD? You haven't done the role. There's that risk. So I do think there is a lot about, I was within a business, the opportunity came up within the business, and there is a bit about the performance of the function and the performance and what results we as a team had been able to deliver that put me in a good position. But I think this comes back to one of your earlier questions, which is how easy is it to do? I still don't think it's very easy to do, and it's not saying I've done a marvellous job. I think it's a situation of circumstance where I was within a business, the stars aligned, the opportunity came up, and the business willing to take a chance on someone that didn't have that experience. So I do think, as an industry, we've still got more work to do to really get to the point where our skills and how we sell ourselves and how we maybe put it to not get sifted out by AI. How do you write an amazing CV that says, actually, you can be a CEO based upon everything that you've done and delivered? And I do think there's a part of responsibility on behalf of the hiring organisations to equally be more open about actually considering other functions. So I was just trying to bridge the gap, because I don't want anyone sitting there going, well, it looks, well done you, you're sitting there, you've managed to do it. But actually it was partly because I do think it was just stars aligned. The stars aligned.
So let's just imagine it was deliberate. So let's just say you, through some lens, had an aspiration back when you were 17 to be a CEO. So regardless of the fact that you went into procurement, are there any things you would deliberately do, differently or otherwise, in hindsight, to get you to where you are now?
I'm going to say no.
Great
Absolutely not.
answer. Love that.
Absolutely not. I've learned it all the way.
Okay.
All the way along. I've met brilliant people. I've had people that I've had the privilege of people that have supported me and coached me. I've worked for organisations that I've loved. I've worked for organisations that I learnt from, and in different ways. And that's the scars on our backs. That's what shapes us as people. So, and never is every day a perfect day.
But that's great. So if you're then going to save people from getting those scars, right? And you're going to say, right, so therefore, my advice to you, you want to go on this path, start doing this now, and that's going to help the journey.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? How would you summarize that?
So I'd look at what are the fundamental skills that you need to run a business. Absolute basics. What do you need? And how can what you do help? Now that's not being a category expert in IT, okay? But it's about having knowledge and understanding of that and how it interacts with an organisation. It's not about being the best marketing category director, but it's really good to understand marketing, digital, and how that will work within a business. Commercially, understanding the business that you operate within, and understand what truly drives revenue, what truly drives, if you're in a guest-facing industry like hospitality, actually what drives guest satisfaction. So when I'm thinking about buying, sourcing a new bed for a hotel, actually, what is it that guests want?
Yeah.
How do we go out and source it? How do we make sure that it's not just about how we deliver the supply chain and the bed at a cost that makes sense and a technical requirement? Actually, how does it fit into the broader play, which is actually the bed's an anchor point of the brand proposition. Really important about a great night's sleep. We anchor the brand off the back of that, and therefore we're going to it plays a bigger role. So you look across all of the functions that anyone within procurement that has got experience between direct and indirect, they all ultimately link back to having an impact on the business and a material impact on the business. So I think follow the money commercially. So actually looking at understanding the commercial engine of the business is vitally important. Understanding how to really structure an operation and actually what works. So where you have the opportunity to run a function, develop a function, how does that sit within the organisation and complement the organisation to drive value? And how does it tie in with fundamentally the objectives of what you're trying to achieve. Um, and every function that I've had the privilege of representing in some way, shape or form from a procurement perspective, when you become the MD and the CEO, you suddenly have those functions that are there within the organisation to then deliver. So you understand their requirements. I also have a procurement function that reports into CFO.
Interesting. I'm going to pick up on that. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I'll go back to. I'll pick up on that. That's an interesting point and an interesting perspective that we can't miss. I mean, I'll go back to my question about you know, so how's your day job going? But I'll sprinkle into that and say, um, you came into an organization, as you said, it wasn't necessarily giving a return to the shareholder. It's doing well now, so it'd be interesting to put the question into, what are you doing in your day job, and how did you turn that business around? What could a sprinkling of spice you put into it?
Um, it took a bit. So I think the first 2 to 3 months are just understanding. So you've got to take a bit of time to genuinely understand, the mechanics of the business, what's going on. But you generally quite quickly, when you spend time with, be it the functional heads, spend time with CFO, understand a bit about the history of the business, spend time with the board, understand their expectations, and that for me was that experience and relationship with the board has been that's been a really good learning journey. So actually being clear around board's expectations. So when I first joined, our chairman was changing. We had a number of board members change throughout the first year. So being clear and understanding their expectations was important. Being able to shape a strategy and a plan that they would buy into was equally important. So all of the skills from a procurement perspective, which is dealing with your exco, dealing with your board, influence, relationship, all the fundamentals, that was a big part of it. And before you get to the point of going, well, I now know what to do with the business, it takes longer than 3 months. It takes a little bit longer. Is, have I got the right people? So have I got the right structure? Not only have I got the right people and the right structure, but are they clear around roles, responsibilities? And a large part of the journey that we've been on, and the journey we've been on has delivered over the last 4 years phenomenal results. So when you look at top line revenue, so across our 11 properties, top line revenues increased by 77%.
Wow.
And EBITDA by 86%. And that, that number itself, those numbers, when you look at it from a core financial KPI perspective, and we're delivering returns to shareholders. So we're regularly returning dividends back to shareholders. So, okay, what are the fundamentals that shareholders want? They want a profitable business, and they want a business that returns value. Right, okay, I get that. And I had a very, very clear conversation with my chairman when I first joined, when I first moved here, Sam. Honestly, it was one of the eye-opening moments when you go, I've moved my family, I've taken the plunge, I'm here in Dubai, and I'm going to go and meet my chairman for what felt like an unofficial kind of catch-up. It was a Victory Heights. I thought, this is marvellous. We're going to go sit at the golf club. Brilliant. And we're sitting, and I'll meet him I'll get a message from him saying that he's sitting at the picnic bench outside. I thought, this is such a nice, relaxed way of sliding into this new role. It's brilliant. And needless to say, the conversation went slightly differently. It's good. It was a good conversation, but it was very, very clear, which is I joined in September, started officially in October. We went straight to budgeting. Literally straight into budgeting. So this was around the December time, and that's what I meant. And I kind of said, look, preliminarily, this is what we're thinking about from a budget perspective. And he turned around, he said to me, of all the businesses and of all my business units I manage, none of them are going to make a loss. Okay, because we were still at that point. I've been weeks into the rut, and it just it totally focuses you, laser focusing. You go right, clear, and at that point you take it away and go, okay, so how do you get through this, and what are the things that we need to fix, and how do we do that? And a lot of that was about operating model. A lot of that was about how we commercially ultimately run the business. So commercial, as an example, was the responsibility of operations at each property. We had centralized revenue support and a revenue management system, but it wasn't rolled out at each property and used. So using technology to drive decision making. and that led to, well, actually, we're going to need to think about have we got the right skill and right capability. And it wasn't that we hadn't previously, but was it best placed in terms of where commercial responsibility sat? So the first part of the organizational change and operating model is about centralization of commercial. So centralized commercial, revenue, sales, distribution, bring them in. To do that, I needed the right talent. So I needed to bring talent in, of which we did. Then the team established underneath, so sales, revenue, distribution, and all of that process, and that include contact center, etc., was an 18-month project. But over those 18 months, the minute we moved to pricing and managing revenue centrally, and using the system, the revenue management system, to drive it, that was the lever that really started to drive much better commercial decision making. So I think I'll come back to follow the money, operating model, right skill, right talent, right seat. That was really important. And then as that evolves, you start to get into a place where you start thinking, well, actually, how can we continue to drive not only efficiency in terms of our costs and how we operate, but how we use technology differently? How can we invest back into the business in terms of product proposition? So we're currently refurbing a lot of our hotels. We've done that through time and effort in terms of being able to make sure that we've got the cash flow to be able to do so. We refinanced as well, so we sold a plot of land and we refinanced, so there's an experience there. And we then paid down some of the loan, and we also paid back quite a large amount to our shareholders. And we got the business back in a place where profitable, cash was strong. We had a plan in terms of capital, what we're going to have, what we want to spend our money on. And that got us to a position across our 3 pillars, which was trade the business brilliantly. Second pillar of the strategy was invest back into the business. And the third pillar was all about profitable growth. And the first 2 years of the journey, so it's year 4 now, was all about earning the right to grow. Once we got past the fact that we could trade the business brilliantly and we could then invest back, we're then now in a place where we're talking about profitable growth. So we've earned that right, and we're now actually focused on how do we grow the brand further. But it just starts with kind of, why are we doing it this way? Are we doing it the most appropriate way? It's ruthlessly competitive, the market. Every dirham counts, literally, and we're mid-market, and we don't have lots of flex in terms of budget. So understanding how to run a mid-market operation, a mid-market business, is important, because cost is king, and whatever we can do to drive revenue in terms of those dirhams matters. So it creates a great opportunity to learn, and a great opportunity to really shape the performance of the business and set the strategy, set the plan, recruit the right people, set the right operating model, and get into trading and delivering the results.
Fantastic. So there you are. You come out to Dubai. For this, you're thrown in there almost to a certain extent. The Victory Heights. Know it very well. And you go in there, and I think you mentioned something that's quite interesting. You said the business has now earned the right, and I think that's a common phrase around procurement, isn't it? About earning the right. So your business has earned the right to be acknowledged as a success, and you've earned the right. You've almost taken the shadow. You're not CPO. That's behind you now. So you've earned the right, and you're in your position. So with going back to the question I was going to ask before, so you now get your new hat on, and you have perhaps a procurement head reporting to you as one of your many functional reports. So with your kind of business leader hat on, what advice would you be giving to your CPO self at this point, in terms of how they can be a success, or how they should be operating?
In general?
Yeah, in general.
In general, within my business, or generally,
or otherwise.
I think it comes back to much of the same, which is you got to understand, what does the business need and how can I best support it, in simple terms. You can overcomplicate it. We could spend a lot of time overcomplicating it, but if you can build the relationship and the rapport and the trust with the CEO, and be clear around how I can, how you can help them, it's not rocket science. In terms of what you need to deliver, how you deliver that, I think, is very important. So once you're clear, it's all well and good having a a debate around the priorities, I think it then comes to the rubber hits the road and you go, well, actually, no, we know how we're going to deliver it. I'm going to make sure I've got a team that can deliver it. I'm going to ensure that, because I think a big part becomes integrity. So, and trust, you're going to stick to what you said you're going to do, and you're going to make sure that therefore it delivers against the, whatever you've agreed in terms of your objectives. So I think track record and delivery is key and is king from a procurement perspective. The other part is helping manage expectations. So, because life changes, things change, and there's many an instance where I've had to revisit conversations I've had with the board, where actually it's not all good news. There will be things that go wrong, and it's just, again, it's how you build a relationship and rapport with the CEO and with the board in terms of what needs to get delivered and how it's getting delivered. And I think if you have that really clear channel of communication, so be that regular one-to-ones, be that regular reviews of objectives, be that, don't allow it to become too informal, because sometimes it can be, I trust you to deliver, and then suddenly it hits a wall and there's a problem. Yeah. And that breakdown of communication, or that lack of real formal time to sit down, it doesn't need to be, it's not like a checkbox exercise. It's about having meaningful dialogue about all the things that matter most, and then actually kind of making sure that you track and hold everybody to account on it, and you deliver against it. Because I think if you can then, that helps you build a principle of trust, and you deliver what you say you're going to deliver, and your team do, and your team are also clear as well. You're not changing direction. So I think there's a piece around clarity from CEO to CPO. I think the CPO then needs to make sure they've got the structure, operate model themselves in place, the right people in the right role with the right capability, right attitude, right training, right support to then go and deliver against it. And I also think there's a piece about looking out a bit further down the horizon, which is, we know what we need to do now, but what might we want to be doing tomorrow? What might we want to do next year? What are the things that we can start to help influence in terms of strategy? So, you take hospitality, you take hotels. Actually, can I look at technology that means I can now take modular builds, right? Can I take modular build and bring it meaningfully to the Middle East market? Because actually that will mean I can significantly reduce my cost per key, and I can get it open and operating quicker. Marvelous. It's thinking about that. So actually, how can the function and how can procurement help to drive that type of efficiency, that it becomes really meaningful? It's not just about driving cost out or controlling or mitigating. It's actually about genuinely turning the dial in terms of the organisation, and help to find solutions to problems that might not be the problem for now, but it could be an opportunity.
Well, that's quite interesting. So what you're saying is, from a procurement head's perspective, understand what the CEO wants, understand what the business wants first,
Absolutely.
then come up with your strategy, rather than the other around, assuming what procurement needs to deliver, because it needs to be contextualized into business needs, right?
How many times have you been sold something you don't want to be sold? and that's the reality. And I think sometimes the frustration within, I've had it in the past. And there's experience where I'm going, this is such a clear, logical thing that we need to do. No one can argue this. This is such an obvious thing, and you do all of your work, you do all of your thinking, but actually it lands really flat when you go and talk about it, because it's maybe not that, A, you haven't chosen the right time, and B, you may not have positioned it in the right way in terms of actually how it can matter for the business and why it's important. You come back to why. Why does it matter? Why is it important? And I think choosing your moment, certainly, and there's moments, and this is the scars on the back moment, when if you don't position it and condition it and signal it, if it lands cold or it's just not in the crosshairs of what matters most for the CEO or any of the board at that point in time, you can miss your moment. So I think how you plan, it comes back to planning again. I've got to change, or I've got a decision that I need to, how do I get to yes? So what do I need to think about? Who do I need to influence outside of the room? So who are the conversations I need to have with to get them on side in the room? How can I test my thinking? Who have I got that's a trusted advisor that I can go and bounce this off and go, does this make sense? And then you've got your plan to go, now it's ready and it's the right time. Because the recovery activity required when you get It doesn't. I don't get it. I'm not keen. I don't understand what you're trying to say. Why? It's really difficult because you've then lost that. You've lost that moment, and the CEO is busy. They're thinking constantly about lots of different elements. So when you look at it and go, I take my role. I pivot between the board and I pivot between the business. And I'd also say be careful what you wish for, because that little place in the middle, that gap that you've really wanted, it can be quite lonely. It can be quite lonely at times, because you have to lead a business with a team. You don't lead on your own. It's not all about I. You lead with your team, right? And you make sure you've got a team there that are self-sufficient and capable and brilliant. Get the best team you possibly can. But there are moments when you have to have oxygen there, and you have to have oxygen there, and then you're on your own. So I will still find trusted advisors to go and have a conversation when there's things I need to think about in terms of changing the business. But when you're a function, you've got to remember you're a number of functions that CEO will be responsible for. And it all sounds really obvious. But if you catch them on the wrong moment, on the wrong day, and it's not been structured in the right way, and you may not have got your pre-read out clear enough or on time, or you catch them cold, getting to yes is going to be, it can be tricky. And then you've got to go, and you might have rallied an entire team up ready for yes. And suddenly it's don't get it, not doing it, it's not my priority. And everybody gets a bit deflated by it. So
I think we've created this kind of podcast as a kind of almost like a confessional. So it's
yeah.
a place you can kind of
No, it's good.
you can talk about these things.
I've come, yeah, no. I've come here. I'll walk away with lighter shoulders.
So your CPO. Who does your CPO report to? So we spoke about reporting lines earlier.
Hmm.
Should the CPO report to finance, and who do they report to in your organisation?
So reports into finance at the moment. Yeah, reports into finance. So and that is, our function is quite small. When you look at the procurement function, it's not huge. If the question is more holistically based upon my experience, where would I see it? My my personal view. My personal view is it depends on the type of organisation. So it depends is an awful way to answer the question, right? And I won't sit on the fence. I will get to it. So there is a part of play which is it depends on the type of organisation you work for. There's a bit about relevance. We often talk about direct and indirect, and one man's direct is another man's indirect. So you take indirect procurement at Tesco, and it's a lot of money, and it's all very important. And then you talk about direct at Tesco, and it can inevitably be buying potatoes and other bits, and that's really important. So I think you've got to be careful about segregating between direct and indirect procurement. Of an organisation, when the spend is a significant value of that business, my view would be it warrants a direct report into the CEO. And that's my view. That's my view. And I think it should be based upon not only how much you spend and how much you save, but the risk you manage, all of the responsibility around corporate social responsibility. The role in procurement supply chain is, it can be the heart and lungs of a business. If it goes wrong, and we've seen lots of examples, the KFC one is a classic one, and I remember the marketing that then came out after that. A supply chain falls over, you've got a real problem. So when it is part of the heart and lungs of what delivers the top line, my sense is it should be into CEO.
Brilliant. Well, there you go. You've answered that tough question. We ask all of our guests on this show that question, and there's another question we also ask all our guests. So something to take away for people who are dialing in. So, in terms of influences across your career, is there a reference or a book that's kind of shaped some of your thinking, some of your learnings that you want to share with people?
There's quite a few. To pin one in particular. I spoke earlier about how you get to why. Always ask, kind of understand why effectively. And Simon Sinek wrote a book about that. And yeah, it's really simple. Yeah, understanding why before you start focusing on how and when is like uber simple logic. But it often is quite powerful, and it's the kid principle. I'm going to ask until I get it. Why? And with children, right? Well, you get asked that an awful lot. But I do think we as adults sometimes get to a position where we will listen And then sometimes either through respect or we don't want to challenge or we don't want to push, we don't actually get to understand why. And we then start on a path which inevitably can cost a lot of time and effort, spin up a load of resource and time. And actually, you're not entirely clear as an operation or as a business or as a team exactly what it is you're trying to solve. And I think the principle that he frames it, which is, always effectively start with why, is really important, because it's a question, it's the most simple question, but it often is the one that, and it should be asked to the most senior person in the room as well. So if you are sitting there, and if I'm sitting there saying, actually, I think this is logical and we should consider this, I'm okay to be asked why. And if my answer's not good enough, continue to ask until we are clear collectively on what we're doing. So it feels basic, but actually some of those basic pieces, if you don't get right at the start, can inevitably cause a lot of problems as you move along down the path.
Brilliant. And what was the name of the book again?
Start with why.
Start with why. There you go.
Silence.
Plug on there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Simon, thanks a lot for your insights. Final thing, I mean, you like High, you moved to Dubai. You're now here. You're here to stay?
I am here to stay.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah. It comes back to where does your career go and what opportunities are going to come out. You don't ever know, right? You never know. But I think the Middle East and the time in the Middle East has been a very, very enjoyable experience. The vision and actually getting things done is quite inspirational. Brilliant track record of delivering. You look at the size and scale of, you just take Dubai alone over the last 50 years, it's staggering. And you've been here, how long have you been here now?
17 years now. So yeah.
17 years. Yeah. There you go. And you're not going anywhere?
No plans to go there. I'm
going to ask
you early anyway.
now can I interview you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's reverse it now. Part 2.
Part 2. What's your favourite book?
I've got loads. My favourite recent book, I think I read the CPO recently. That's very procurement wise, but I'm also almost finished reading The Long Walk to Freedom, which is Nelson Mandela's book. So that's a very, very difficult book. It's taken me hours to read. Yeah. So when I finish that, I'll give a load of feedback around that. I'm also reading a book called Rising Above Wounds by a friend of mine. It's kind of a psychologically charged book. So yeah, I typically read several at a time. Yeah. And I can't say I've got a favorite, but I was rearranging my quite formidable bookshelf the other day, and a book could have fell out. And it's a book that was given to me in 1998 by an ex-boss of mine. And it's the Dr. Seuss book, The Places You'll Go.
Okay.
And it was hilarious. So I actually read it. She's actually written a note in it saying, Sam, you're going to do well, and best of luck in your journey. And I don't know why it fell out the bookcase, but I think it's a fantastic book. So yeah, I think it is quite apt that you asked me that today, seeing as I did that yesterday.
It jumped out the bookcase.
It literally did. Dusty as well.
Yeah. Oh, very good.
There you go. Simon, thanks for coming in. I think your insights have been invaluable. Thanks so much. Thanks for everything you do and for being a role model, and for all the help you do with the CIPS community, the procurement community, and stand up as someone who fulfills that title, I think, where people say, if you want to be it, you got to see it. If people want to be a CEO, they want to see someone who's done it, and that's what you are. So thank you so much.
And thank you, and thanks for your time, Sam. It's I think you continue to push the CIPS banner and industry in the region as well. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks very much.